And since I was studying Japanese, I spoke Japanese, I love music. I was like, why would I do anything besides sing in Japan?
Hey guys, welcome back to the Kodokan Podcast. Before we get to this week's episode, make sure to hit that like button. But in this episode, we continue our conversation with Nick, who is a celebrity pop artist in Japan and also speaks perfect Japanese. If you guys haven't checked the first part out yet, make sure to watch that first because we talk about how he learned Japanese and his exact study methods. And in this second part, we talk about him coming to Japan and how he was able to finally fulfill his dreams of becoming a famous pop artist in the country. And as always, we have bonus clips on Patreon of stuff that we didn't include in the episode. So check that out if you guys want to support the podcast. But hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. How long did it take you, like, when you landed in Japan to getting, like, a record deal?
So I came to Japan in 2010, and then I released my first major label record in 2013. So the record deal came, I guess, a little less than 3 years after I came to Japan. The reason that I was able to get a record deal was because I joined a Japanese TV show where people come from all over the world and kind of sing not kind of, they do sing. They sing Japanese songs. People come from all over the world and sing Japanese songs. And it's kind of a little bit like like an American Idol or The Voice kind of thing where it's a competition. But it's not a competition in the same sense. Like, you don't get a record deal for winning. You just get the exposure of being on TV and then get a fan base. And then to those who, I guess, the record industry feels are, viable commercially, record deals are either given or not given. Even if you win, you can come back and be like the returning champion. And it's more like kind of like a boxing tournament where, like, you win and then it's over, like the one tournament is over, and then there's another tournament eventually, and you can keep participating, and it's like a continuous thing. So I ended up winning the competition 3 times. And I was on it probably like 15 times or so.
How did you actually get on the show?
I got a message on my blog that I had been writing at the time. There's a blog website in Japan called Ameba, which is like it's also now it's a TV station as well. But the TV station is called Nihon Terebi, so the Japan Television Broadcasting Network, and they just messaged me on my blog. And at first I thought, there's like, who's gonna message somebody on a blog and ask them to be on TV? There's no way that this is legit. And so I didn't even reply for a month or so. But I got a few different messages, and they ended up, at the time I had been posting videos of my covers on YouTube. And so they ended up messaging me on YouTube as well. So I eventually replied, and that was just, and then I met up with one of the producers, and so I was on the very first show. So the show started in 2011. And then it's still, I think technically, maybe right now with the coronavirus situation, it's difficult to have people come to Japan to sing. So right. I don't think it's been on recently, but definitely. So I was on the first show, and then I was on the show for like every show for the first like 16 runs, and I think that's like almost all of them. I think it's been aired like 18 or maybe like a little less than 20 times, and I was on almost every airing or showing. I kind of like was one of the, I guess, like faces of the show. So it just kind of turned into a project that I was really consistently involved with. And because it was on like primetime TV in Japan, there were a lot of people watching it. And that was kind of how I got my initial recognition in the industry.
I see. Yeah, I'm just like imagining like how that boxing tournament vibe that you mentioned before. Just like you have an announcer coming in and singing from the red corner from Portland, Oregon.
That's a rap battle,
Nicholas.
Right? Well, it actually is kind of like that.
Yeah.
So the stage is even kind of like has the ropes and everything, so it's like a boxing ring. So it's meant to be like that kind of vibe. And there's there's the guy who introduces everybody does talk like that. He's like, from America, Nicholas Edwards. And I have such a boring name. Every time I heard, sorry to my parents, but every time I heard him like screaming Nicholas Edwards, I was like, God, I should have lied and come up with some like really fancy, interesting name, because I feel like, well, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's just because it's my name, so it feels boring. But every time he'd yell that name, I'd be like, I should have given him something more interesting to yell, because it sounds like, and coming to the stage, John Smith. It's just like, but yeah, it's like it's that kind of like battle vibe. But it's not. There's a winner, and I won a few times, but the show is not even really, the point of the show isn't even really necessarily to win. It's more like kind of like a cultural exchange kind of show. So it's, you know, people from all over the world, from all kinds of places, like Kenya, from the States, from Europe, from wherever,
Right.
like Kazakhstan. And then it kind of becomes like, you know, a bunch of people coming together to kind of like celebrate Japanese music. So it is a competition, but it was not like it wasn't like I would imagine an actual like battle, like boxing match would be. We're not like trash talking each other. So it's just
It's like all
it's
good
a really
vibes.
friendly vibe. Yeah, all good vibes.
You love to hear it. And I mean, you did talk about kind of how when you did have that record deal, your studio kind of had a specific image they kind of wanted to put on you, and like including dyeing your hair a certain color. So can you kind of talk more about how them putting that image on you kind of like affected you and what you kind of thought about that?
Well, it was really interesting because I'm blonde. Well, my hair is dyed a little darker right now, but I'm
Right.
like, in the States, I guess we would say like strawberry blonde or like rose. Like my hair is kind of like blonde red. But they were like, no, you have to. And well, the thing that really made me laugh in the beginning was the phrase that they would use to kind of, I guess, like, I don't want to say sell me. What's the word I'm looking for? To like promote me.
Right.
Was like blonde haired, blue eyed. And I'm like, I don't even have blue eyes, but I mean, I have green eyes. So to Japanese people, it's kind of like all the same. But to American people, it would be like, I have green eyes. I don't have blue eyes. But to Japanese people, like, well, you have something other than brown eyes. So you have blue eyes as far as we're concerned. So they asked me to dye my hair really like actual blonde, like platinum blonde. And I also wasn't allowed to get tan, which, I mean, you know, East Asia, there's a lot of importance placed on being, I guess, pale, for lack of a better word.
Right.
There's a lot of not white in the sense that like I'm a white person, but white as in like they like to have really white skin. Like even if you look back to like geisha or whatever, it's been kind of like a recurring theme in East Asian beauty standards. But it felt really, really weird to me because Japanese people will like compliment how white your skin is, and I'll be like, ooh, that is A, problematic, and B, I don't think that I would ideally not be as pale as I am if I could. Unfortunately, I was not blessed with the tanning gene, so it's, as everybody on my YouTube channel comment section has notified me, when I do get a tan, it's a fake tan, and I'm really, really bad at my hands. So especially because in Japan, you can't like go somewhere and get a fake tan like you can in the States. So you kind of have to do it yourself. And you would think that I'm really detail oriented, but I'm definitely not. So I'm like, who cares if my hands are just really pale and the rest of me is like kind of orange. But I'm just like, it's a summer vibe. You just let the hands be pale. But so Japanese people, there's a lot of things like beauty standard related in Japan that, I mean, obviously just from the perspective of it feeling foreign to me, but also in the sense that a lot of the beauty standards in Japan feel like really, really directly opposite of America in a lot of ways. The other one would be that I think American people would, that freaks out American people, is that Japanese people really don't like beards. And for like a middle-aged white man, a beard is the way to go for most people. So especially if you don't got the jawline to be shaved. So it was weird to me, just kind of like the points that they focused on, and being that I was already blonde, but they're like, we want you to be blonde in the way that Japanese people imagine blonde, not the way that American people are actually blonde, or like whatever white people are actually blonde. So it was weird to be like faking my European features
Right.
because I was already blonde and I already had light eyes and I was already pale, but they wanted all of those to be even more than what they started off being. So it was just, you know, they wanted me to be kind of like a prince in an anime. Like,
Uh-huh.
like skinny and like pretty, I guess. And I don't know, I wouldn't say that I was necessarily like really deeply offended by any of that. I just thought it was very strange. And I also just thought it was kind of, they made a really big deal about it, but I don't think that it was really that the consumers really cared as much as the people who were producing everything just thought that it was a good idea. I mean, once they had the idea, they couldn't let it go. So my hair was bleached within an inch of its life, and then my skin was also like as pale as it could possibly be, and that was their image of me. But I now don't have to really listen to what anybody says, so I dye my hair all the time, and again, fake tan when I feel like I can maintain it. But I'm doing a stage play right now, so I don't want to be on stage looking... Well, also, because Japanese people, you know, place so much importance on being as pale as possible, especially women, even just standing on stage, if I was really tan, it would just be like, I would stick out because everybody's so pale. So I just kind of have ended up, even though it's summer here now, I have not been on my usual spray tan kick. My sheets are thanking me. My sheets are very excited about how I'm not staining them every time I get in bed for night. But yeah, so that was how it was in the beginning.
Nice.
Does your jimusho like restrict you in like the stuff you say or your actions? Like, for example, do they say like you can't date or you can't be seen in certain places?
No, not outright. I mean, and that's a funny thing because that made me really uncomfortable in the beginning as well. And I've never been told once to not, to like, or it's never been like contractually, like you're not allowed to date. And that really grosses me out. Like, I think that is, you know, there's kind of like the Japanese entertainment industry is oftentimes based around, I guess like what is it called? Like parasocial relationships, where it's like the person watching is meant to like think of you as their boyfriend or girlfriend. And so if you're like outright dating someone, then you're like basically like ruining everybody's experience. And I'm of the mind where I'm like, well, if you don't want to listen to my music because I'm dating someone, then I think that's a you problem. Definitely not a me problem. But like living here for so long, it's one of those things where even if I were dating someone, there's no part of me that would want to like put that online and give, because I feel like when you put something online, it's almost like that is permission for people to express their opinion about it. And for me, even if I were dating someone, I wouldn't want to put them online and be like, well, here's my significant other, everybody, what do you think? Because that's not like something that I want to open up to discussion for the world.
Right.
Especially because, that would be, I mean, I guess if it was like someone who I worked with or who was in the same field as me, maybe that would be a different story, but it's a privacy thing for them as well. So I wouldn't like, that would not be something that I would want to do. So I think that American people love to put their boyfriends and girlfriends on the internet. But Japanese people, even private Japanese citizens who aren't like, aren't doing anything involved with entertainment, do not tend to like blast their relationships all over social media. Unless they're like doing that specifically as like a couple channel or something.
Right.
So I just think it's just not it's just not the vibe here. You don't,
right. Like one thing that you had mentioned earlier is like when you were going and talking about the music you put out in the past, you kind of look back and you're like, oh, did I really put that out? So I guess how did you kind of evolve in your music then? Because I mean, you've been doing this for quite a while now. How would you say you kind of found, I guess, your voice?
I think that for me, I've always wanted to be a good representative of like the ways in which, I don't want to say cultural exchange, like it's an educational topic, but cultural exchange in the sense that like sharing your culture. I want to be a good representative of how sharing culture can really enrich your life. And I think that is something that I've always wanted to represent through my music, in the sense that I write the lyrics and the music to all my songs. But I don't try to write in a way that is really, really like characteristically Japanese, in the sense that I like to make sure that I am keeping my perspective as someone who grew up in the States, moved to Japan, has lived in Japan for however many years. I want to make sure that I'm staying true to that perspective, because I think that if I were to just come to Japan, speak perfect Japanese, I'm sure that if I took classes the way that like TV announcers take classes to speak like perfect Hyojungo, then that would be an attainable goal. But I feel like I'm at a level now where the mistakes that I do make in Japanese, or I guess mistakes, because even within Japan there's a lot of variety in what's a correct way to speak, but those kind of are a part of who I am at this point.
Right. And
it took a long time to get to that point where I was like, not that I'm done learning Japanese, because I'll always be, I think, continuing my, study of Japan, Japanese culture, and Japanese language. But I think that I've got to a point where I know what parts of me are authentically me at this point. Because when you move from one culture to another, you kind of have to, it kind of gives you an opportunity to figure out like what parts of my personality and what parts of like the way that I interact with people are actually me and what is just kind of like reflected from the environment. Because, you know, the way that you interact with people is completely different when you go from somewhere very individualistic culture in the States and then very group-oriented culture in Japan. And when you're basically starting from scratch and kind of rebuilding yourself in the sense that nobody here in Japan knows, well, in the beginning when I came, knew who I was in the way that like my family knows who I am, my friends, my teachers know who I am. So I kind of had to start from scratch and figure out what I wanted to keep with me and what was important to me, what parts of me were important enough that I wanted to make sure that they were still being conveyed in Japanese. Right. And I think that I have slowly but surely, and there's still more work to be done, but figured out like what parts of me are really, really me. And I want to make sure that I'm always reflecting that in my music, and not just my music, but my YouTube channel as well. My, you know, any work that I do in general. So knowing that my unique perspective and knowing what about that is important to me as a person is kind of what has developed my voice, I think, and what kind of motivates me to continue to perfect my craft, I guess. It's a really dramatic way to say that, but
that was a great answer. I mean, very well thought out. A lot of experiences that you've gone through to get there. So, I mean, love to hear it. I mean, love to continue hearing it through your music and your YouTube channel. So can't wait for more of that. I think this is a good spot to close the podcast for the day. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. We were honored to have you. It was a really fun time today. I had a great conversation with you, man.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. And at the end of all our podcasts, Nick, I mean, we know that you've watched our podcast before. This is great having a Korekara fan on, you know? You know that we do the Korekara message to the listeners at the end of each of our podcasts, which can be anything from a Japanese proverb to something fun that you would like to say. And I think this time around, since you're on the show, Nick, we're thinking maybe it's time we just has to be in Japanese, and we're going to put you on the spot that, I mean, you finally speak Japanese. It's time, Nick. It's time.
I could just in Japanese, a message to the listeners?
Yep.
Alrighty. これからポッドキャストを、お聞きの皆さん、聞いていただいてありがとうございました。僕、ニコラス・エドワーズなんですけれども、YouTube など、いろんなところで活動させていただいているので、もしよかったらぜひ今後よろしくお願いいたします。これからも少しでも、いい形で、アメリカを代表して日本で活動していきたいとも思っていますし、逆に日本で身についたいろんなこと、いろんな、人生を豊かにしていただいた経験、そういうものを活かして、ある意味こう日本も世界で代表できるようなそんな活動もしていきたいなと思っているので、皆さん今後ともよろしくお願いいたします。ありがとうございました。
There it is. There, that was perfect. Thank you so much for coming on once again. It was great having you. We'll catch you on the next one, guys. Peace.
Bye-bye.
Hey guys, thanks for making it to the end of the video. It was great talking to Nick today. Let us know in the comment section below if you learned something new this podcast.
Yeah, we want to thank our patrons, Phantom Madman, Alan Card, KH90, Drew, Jack, Dylan, and Yuri. So thank you guys for supporting the podcast on Patreon.
Stay tuned for the next video, guys. We have a fun one coming up, talking to Brit versus Japan, aka Matt. So hope you're ready for that next week. Peace.